On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC 313 co-main event, 5-round fight, Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker. We'll get into it in a second, but first, my name is James Lynch. If you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats and intangibles. Then I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight at the end. I would love to hear your prediction for this fight in the comments once you're done watching this video. Let's do a quick tail of the tape between these two. The highlight, Justin Gaethje, 25-5, Dan Hooker, 24-12, 36 years old to 35, so not a huge age gap there. 5'11 to 6 feet tall, not a huge height difference there. 70 to 75.5, so Hooker will have the reach advantage in this fight. Two great camps too, Elevation Fight Team, City Kickboxing. Let's get into it. We'll start first with the former BMF champ, Justin Gaethje. So I mentioned it there, 25-5 record. He boasts a number of knockouts, 19 actually to be exact. He's got 2 submissions and 4 decisions. He's currently ranked number 3 in the division. He's 36 years old, 5'11 with a 70-inch reach. He's the former interim UFC lightweight champion, not light heavyweight. He'd have to eat a lot to get to 205, I'm sure. So the former interim UFC lightweight champion. He's the former UFC BMF champion. He's got fight of the night 8 times. He's got performance of the night 5 times. They call him the highlight for a reason. He gets a lot of entertaining, he's in a lot of entertaining fights, I should say. Gaethje did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros way back in 2011. You can see there, August of 2011, actually fought Kevin Kroom, who ended up going to the UFC one day. Did not make his UFC debut until July of 2017. But keep in mind, that's because he was in World Series of Fighting and he was the champion over there, now known as PFL. So yeah, he was making some pretty good money over there in WSOF before coming over to the UFC. He is 8-5 in the UFC. He has got 6 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Edson Barbosa, Donald Cerrone, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Rafael Fiziev, and most recently Dustin Poirier as far as his last win. Some notable losses include Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, and most recently Max Holloway. He's only had 1 close fight. He's gone the distance before, but the only close fight he's had was that fight against Rafael Fiziev. And if you look there on MMA Decisions, where you can see the media scorecards on that one, it was at UFC 286 in March of 2023. Majority did have Gaethje winning. They had 17 media members scoring it for Gaethje, but 10 media members scored it for Fiziev. So I remember coming away from that fight thought Gaethje won, I should say. But it was, again, Fiziev put up a good fight. It was one of those fights too where Gaethje was being counted out. People thought, okay, well, Fiziev's the new, up and comer. He's going to get the win, and that's not what happened. Gaethje turned back the clock and ended up getting the win, and then he followed that up with the head kick win over Dustin Poirier. So, it looked like Gaethje was headed for another title shot. Of course, we know what happens. He ends up fighting Max Holloway in one of the best fights ever. That fight was amazing at UFC 300. And it was Holloway, who people were counting out, ended up getting the win and eventually finishing Justin Gaethje in the 5th round. Let's call it like it is, though. Holloway points to the ground. Him and Gaethje are going back and forth in that fight. If Gaethje isn't so reckless, he's probably not getting knocked out. He wouldn't have won the fight, but that's something to keep in mind, that Gaethje was just asking to get knocked out in that 5th round. He was tired. He was losing the fight. He went for broke, and it just so happens that Holloway's the one who ends up putting him away. Saying that, though, Max Holloway does not have a ton of knockout wins, at least not over the last couple of years, so something to keep in mind as well. Now, Gaethje has had a bunch of layoffs in his career. That's one thing to keep in mind. So going from Khabib to Chandler, there was a 378-day layoff. Going from Oliveira to Fiziev, there was a 315-day layoff. Going from Poirier to Holloway, there was a 259-day layoff. And then going from Holloway to Dan Hooker, there was a 329-day layoff. So this will be the second longest layoff Gaethje's had in his UFC career heading into this fight. Something to keep in mind. Let's look at the stats. You can see Justin Gaethje there, that's Dan Hooker. Justin Gaethje, 6.78 significant strikes landed per minute. That's a very high number. Striking accuracy is at 59%. His strikes landed per minute is 7.46. His striking defense at 52%. His takedown average is only at 0.11, which is crazy because he started as a wrestler but became this really good striker. His takedown accuracy is only at 25%. His takedown defense is at 75%, and he doesn't go for submissions at all, really. That's everything you need to know about Justin Gaethje. Let's look on the other side to the hangman, Dan Hooker. Big opportunity here, getting to fight Justin Gaethje. So I mentioned it there. Dan Hooker is 24-12. He's got 11 knockouts, 7 submissions, and 6 decisions. He's currently ranked number 6 in the division. He's 35 years old, 6 feet tall with a 75-inch reach. So he is 75.5-inch reach, I should say. So he's 1 year younger. He'll have a 1-inch height and 5.5-inch reach advantage in this fight. He trains at a City Kickboxing. He's got performance of the night 3 times against Hatsu Hiyoki, Ross Pearson, and James Vick. He's got fight of the night 3 times against Paul Felder, Dustin Poirier, and Mateusz Gamrot. He never had an amateur debut, just like Gaethje went straight to the pros in, what year was it? March of 2009, made his UFC debut in June of 2014, which was at 145 pounds. So when Hooker started his career, he started at 145, then went up to 55. He had, I think, that one-off fight with Arnold Allen, and then moved back up. So that's something to keep in mind. He's 14-8 in the UFC. He's got 9 stoppage wins, some notable wins. Some of these were years ago. I forgot about these. So some notable wins here for Dan Hooker include Gilbert Burns. This is when Burns fought at lightweight. Ali Quinta was ranked at one point. James Vick, I can't remember if he was ranked or not, but still, I remember that being a big deal that he finished him in the first round. Paul Felder was a big one. We'll talk about that fight a little bit later. Jalen Turner, and then obviously Gamrot in his last fight. Very good win there. That's what got him the Gaethje fight. Gamrot highly ranked in the division. He's got a lot of losses. Some of these are at featherweight, so I think people forget he fought Yair Rodriguez back in 2015. If you forgot about that, it makes sense because that fight was almost 10 years ago. He also lost to Jason Knight, which was a weird loss. Edson Barbosa lost to him that was at lightweight, right? Yeah, that was at lightweight. It's weird because obviously Barbosa's the featherweight now. Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Islam Makhachev on short notice. Arnold Allen was his last loss, and that was at 145. So Hooker is on a 3-fight win streak, and he hasn't lost a lightweight fight since October of 2021. Again, that Arnold Allen fight was in 2022. He's had a couple close fights, like I mentioned. Let's talk about the fight against Paul Felder. Again, that was a while ago, 2020. But if you go look at MMA decisions right now, where are we here? I'm just going to pull this up one sec. This is a different fight. So if you go look at the fight on MMA decisions, him beating Paul Felder, you can see the media was a little bit split on this one. Actually, they weren't split. They thought Paul Felder won the fight. So that's something to keep in mind. Maybe Hooker's record's a little bit different. Only 4 media members thought Hooker won that fight. 1 scored it a draw. The rest scored it for Paul Felder, 12 to be exact. So again, that's a fight that could have gone the other way. And then the Gamrot fight, it's worth mentioning. That was a huge win for Hooker. He was a big underdog in that fight. He ends up coming through. But if you look at the media here, they were split on this one. I did think Hooker did enough to win. I was on the fence though. Like it was one of those fights where if you would have scored it for Gamrot, I wouldn't have been upset. I mean, I thought Gamrot did enough. Did enough that it was close enough you could have scored it for him. And the media agrees here. 9 media members scored the fight for Gamrot, 8 scored it for Hooker. So he doesn't win this fight, he's not getting this opportunity. So that's something to keep in mind, sort of looking at this matchup. And then if you look at the stats here, Dan Hooker, significant strikes landed per minute, 5.03, so a little bit less than Gaethje, 48% striking accuracy, striking defense is at 51%, so he does get hit a bit. His takedown accuracy is at 34%, his takedown defense is at 78%. Let's have a look at the odds. Hooker, the underdog, about plus 130 on most books. Gaethje, less than a 2-1 favorite, about minus 155, minus 160 in that range. And Tapology telling a different story. They have Gaethje at 65%, Hooker at 35%, with the majority of people picking Gaethje, 73.4%, picking him by knockout. Okay, this is an interesting fight. It's got fight of the year written all over it. This is one of those fights where I'm going to agree with the odds here, and I'm going with Justin Gaethje. I think Gaethje will knock out Hooker. I'm going 4th round finish. How did I come to this conclusion? Here's how. First and foremost, Gaethje, I think, has fought better opposition and beat them. He's been in there, and I mean, they have a similar opponent in Chandler. Gaethje didn't finish him, but he ended up winning the fight. He's Dustin Poirier, he knocked out. Gaethje overall, like Hooker's fought some great opposition throughout his career, but some of those were at 45. Gaethje's fought at 155 his entire UFC career, and I'd argue he's fought better opposition. We can have a debate about that in the comments. That's fine with me. I think Gaethje's fought better guys. Now, both guys have been knocked out 3 times, but there's a difference in that, again, Gaethje probably was not going to get knocked out against Holloway because he kind of was reckless at the end. He left himself open to get knocked out in that fight. So again, he's still been knocked out twice. Dan Hooker has not only been knocked out 3 times, but he's also been had some tough weight cuts as well to 145. That's why he's at 55. He's a pretty tall guy for the division, not to mention the injuries. I would argue that Hooker, I mean, it's a debatable argument for sure, because Gaethje earlier in his career did get hit a lot too. He was not, whatever his percentage is now. His striking defense was certainly worse. It's improved over the years. His striking defense is at 52%. What's Hooker at? 51. So they both get hit a lot, but I would argue that Hooker has taken the more overall damage if you accumulate the injuries he's had, the weight cuts, all that. That's something that Gaethje hasn't experienced as much. So again, we can debate that in the comments. That's totally fine. I don't think Gaethje looked great against Max Holloway. Holloway, I think, surprised us a lot. I don't want to take anything away from Holloway in that fight because he had an A+ performance, looked outstanding. I think Gaethje's performed better in other fights. For example, the Fiziev fight, even though that fight was close and some people felt like Fiziev might have done enough to win, I think he looked better in that fight. I don't want to say Gaethje had an off night, but I'm expecting him to look better in this fight against Dan Hooker. I would say that Hooker, like we just showed you there with the decision, he barely won his last fight. Now, granted, Gamrot's is a much different fighter than Gaethje is. Not going to debate that whatsoever. But, again, like he gets this win and then he beats, the Jalen Turner win. I'll give him that. That was also fairly close in terms of the result. It was a split decision. And then you go before that, Claudio Puelles, who's not even ranked. So it's like, again, this is what I mean by opposition. Like Claudio Puelles, Jalen Turner, Jalen's ranked, Gamrot's ranked, but Gaethje's been in there with, guys near the top basically since then. Even a Holloway, like I would put him in the top 5 right now if we're talking about, lightweight fights. Fiziv's up there. Oliveira, former champ, that was a title fight. Chandler, Habib. He's been up there with some of the best last couple fights. So again, I think that's something to factor in. And the other thing is Hooker's not that much younger. He's a year younger than Gaethje. It's not like he has like the youth advantage in this fight. The concern too with Gaethje, which kind of goes against my point, is he's had a longer layoff, but I think Gaethje needed that layoff at that type of war with Max Holloway. So again, I'm not going to count out Hooker in this fight. He surprised me. I think I picked Hooker's fights wrong the last couple. I think I even picked Jalen Turner against him. He's the guy to prove people wrong, and this seems like a spot where he could certainly do that. So I'm not counting out Dan Hooker in this fight, but I think the overall body of work with Gaethje is better. I think he's beat better opposition. I think he's more of a solid pick here, and I do think he hits a little bit harder as well. So that's why I'm going 4th round, because I don't think it'll be like a first round. Gaethje's not going to do to Hooker what Chandler did. Like Chandler went in there and finished Hooker quickly. I don't think Hooker's going to do that. I think Hooker's more mature now. He's more, he's less open to getting those types of shots. So I think it'll take a bit for Gaethje to get it done, but I think he will get it done. So I'm going to go 4th round stoppage. Would not also shock me if this fight went the distance and Gaethje just edged it out on the power shots. But I'm going Justin Gaethje, 4th round knockout to get the win over Dan Hooker. I think he does get it done. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Which way you're leaning on this fight? I think most people are picking Gaethje, like the odds suggest. If you're picking Hooker, tell me how you think he does it. I would be curious to hear how you're analyzing this fight and how you think this one goes down. The other thing as well, got to mention, Gaethje had a little bit more 5-round experience too, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that'll pay off a bit. At least off the top of my head, I do. Maybe I should actually check that. You know what? I'm going to check that real quick. I'm just saying things and not backing up, because I know some of those fights, like I think Poirier was a 5-round fight, if I'm not mistaken. Let me have a quick look here. Turner, Puelles, Gamrot were all 5-round fights. Islam was 5 rounds, but it didn't go 5 rounds. And then was Poirier was 5 rounds. Felder was 5 rounds. I think those are the only 2. I feel like Gaethje's had more than that. Let's just quickly check. Just off the top of my head, I feel like Gaethje has done the 5-round thing a little bit more. That's why we check these things. Ferguson was 5 rounds. He went 5 rounds in that fight. Holloway was 5 rounds. He got finished in the 5th round. So, and then Oliveira was 5 rounds, but he got finished in the 1st round. So anyways, I just think that, I think overall, if my math's correct here, Gaethje has like trained for more 5-round fights. So I give him the edge there too. Anyways, I'm picking Gaethje. Like I said, let me know your prediction. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching. This is Early Look. I'll see you next time.